So we'll get started with the actual fight, finally. Now the way that your characters are positioned at the start and the way that the ads are positioned means that you can only shoot one of these rubric marines with Tan. You can't move him to a position where he has two marines in range. So essentially, if you want to get two Skitarii out in the first turn, you'll want the rubric marine to survive Tan's first attack. However, I also want to move Ro into this hex, where this rubric marine is currently standing, which means essentially killing or hitting the marine with Tan, and either killing him or having Ro kill him with his passive ability, and then having Ro move onto this hex. But I can't move Ro there straight away, because if I do... Okay, I didn't do that first, but... So if I move Ro here first, and then I attack this marine with Tan, Tan will take most of his health in the attack, and then Ro will finish him off with his passive. And that will leave Tan with no other targets in range. So Tan will only spawn one Skitarius. However, if I shoot this marine with Tan, spawn a Skitarius, then move Ro here, I can then shoot the marine a second time, still have Ro kill the marine with his passive and move on to his hex, and get two Skitarii spawned. So that's just a little peculiarity of how I'll be doing things here. So, Tan makes his first attack. Now I move Ro into position. Now I attack again. Two Skitarii out, Ro is where I want him, and now I can continue. Now, I set all of this up at the start in a way to restrict Magnus's movement so that he would only be able to move adjacent to high ground. And this rubric marine moved in a way that ended up being very helpful to me. And I could easily have killed him with Ro by attacking him if I had critted. So I think if I were to play this battle again, which I will be, in the future, I will leave this marine just alive, and I won't risk attacking him with Ro and killing him. Because his movement, he essentially moved onto this hex, which stopped Magnus from moving either here, so that the bottom edge of his model was here, or here, which meant that he had to move backwards towards this high ground and sort of box himself into the corner. So I could utilise the high ground adjacent to him to deal extra damage, and also more easily keep him boxed in with the rest of my characters. So this rubric marine survival is actually very important. But it is still, regardless of whether you want to hit him with Ro in this turn or not, it is important to move Ro here. This is because it stops the marine from running through this patch of tall grass and into the backfield here, and shooting at, say this Skitarius or Tan or whoever. Because if he's over here, then that means that he's not over here blocking the boss's movement, which is what I want. So definitely get Ro to this position, but don't necessarily attack this marine. Just let your summons finish him off. I was a bit worried that the Scarab swarms might kill this rubric marine in one fell swoop, so I just fire with Shosal first to make sure that I get his drone deployed. Then I deploy the Scarabs. And the reason for deploying the Scarabs here is that I'm going to spawn a spore mine here to essentially direct the movement of this Terminator so that it moves into this hex, because it can't shoot. If this Scarab Swarm is here, then it can't shoot from this hex to hit the spore mine. So it has to... The AI of units like the Scarab Occult Terminators, they will prioritise sure kills over anything else. So this Terminator deals 4 hits, which means it cannot, in a single attack, kill a Scarab Swarm. However, it can kill a Spore Mine in a single attack. So, given the option between, say, shooting this Scarab Swarm from range over here, or moving into melee over it and hitting it in melee, and attacking a Spore Mine and killing it outright, the Terminator will always choose to kill the Spore Mine outright. So if I spawn a Spore Mine here, the only place that the Terminator can move to and kill it from is this hex. And if the Terminator moves into this hex, then that essentially blocks Magnus's movement over here, it blocks his movement over to this area, it blocks his movement if he wants to sort of go here. So that is a very handy place to have the Terminator standing. And this also highlights the importance of knowing which order units act in. Because I had done an attack on this map before I did this one, and it was a learning experience, and I learnt that this Terminator, out of all of the adds left on the map in this situation, will move first. So I knew that if I put a Spore Mine here, I would end up with the Terminator moving here to attack it. What I hadn't counted on was this Marine, as I said, moving over to this space and really blocking Magnus in, stopping him from moving anywhere over here. And if you think about it, because I have all my characters over here, there's no way he can move to sort of in this area of the map. Because of the Terminator moving forwards over here, he can't move anywhere over this way, he can't move forwards. So he essentially can't use any of his abilities except for Treason of Tzeentch. And if he wants to move, he can only sort of move into either this area or somewhere over here, which puts him next to high ground, which I can then exploit with Row. So this was all very deliberately done to restrict Magnus's movement options to either staying still, which isn't great because he won't be next to high ground, but at least he won't be sort of in the middle of the map and very difficult to prevent from moving around. Or he will have to move somewhere where he is adjacent to high ground, which I can then exploit. So we'll put the Spore Mine down. So as you can see, Magnus moves backwards. He's adjacent to 2 high ground hexes now, so I have a choice of where I can put Row. And I now have to deal with the Terminators before they essentially waste too much of my summon's time. Because of the new Terminator armor trait and just the mere fact that they have a lot of health and armor, if you don't deal with them directly with your characters, say Tan or Row or Shosil, because your characters can do a lot more damage than your summons, you'll just end up with your summons running all over the place, hitting and hitting and hitting them, and not really getting through them fast enough to get a good attack going. So you want to use your high damaging characters to ensure that you kill these Terminators as quickly as possible, which is what I'll do. Now, the first thing to do here is to make sure that the left-hand Terminator won't be able to respawn when it's killed the first time. And this is something that the Biovore is very useful for, i.e. you can pop their Time Ghost by firing a Spore Mine on top of it, and that means that you only have to kill them once. Of course, I can't fire a Spore Mine at this Time Ghost because Magnus is adjacent to that hex. However, that shouldn't be a problem because I can use Row to deal with this Terminator, which I'll be doing shortly. But first things first, I'll make sure that when Tan is triggered by Actus, he will shoot at the left-hand Terminator. I mean, it's already a sure thing because this Terminator is lower on health and he doesn't have the Terminator armor bonus, but I don't trust the AI to do anything sensible, so I soften up the left-hand Terminator first, so that I know that when I trigger Tan with Actus, his second shot will definitely also be directed towards that Terminator, rather than towards this one, because I want them to... Say this Terminator survived all my attacks. It could then move in the next turn and leave a Time Ghost behind, which I then have to pop or it might get killed by a summon before I'm able to pop the Time Ghost, which means it will then respawn at full health, and then I'll have to go through its entire health bar again, and it's all just a massive, massive palaver that you don't want to have to deal with. You want to just get these damn Terminators out the way and start dealing with Magnus. So I finished that Terminator off with Aleph. I can't really do anything useful with Showstall here, aside from use his active on the Terminator, which I might as well do just for a little extra damage to hopefully help finish it off. And then I do something with Ro that is something I've learned is quite useful. And what I do with Ro is put him in between the Terminator and its Time Ghost. What I know will happen in the next turn is that my summons will start attacking the Terminator, and at some point it will be killed by Ro's passive. However, when a Terminator is killed by Ro's passive, or is killed by so not any Terminator, specifically one of these Scarab Occult Terminators with their Time Ghosts. So when one of these Terminators is killed by a mechanical unit adjacent to Ro, he doesn't move into the hex that it was occupying before it died, when it respawns via its Time Ghost ability. So I know that this Scarab Occult Terminator will be killed. Ro will not move from where he is. It will respawn here, and then it will be hit by more of my mechanical summons, and Ro will still be in a position here to attack it with his passive. So what I've done here is essentially guarantee that this Terminator, as long as it doesn't move, it will die in the next turn, as long as it's hit by plenty of mechanical summons, which there is no shortage of on this map. And even if it isn't killed, it will be heavily, heavily damaged and will be very easy to finish off. And that's exactly what happens. To just get an attack in with Ro, might as well just get a little bit of damage on it. And I knew the Terminator wouldn't move away from high ground because there was nowhere else really any good for it to move to. So now the Scarab Swarms are attacking it after it's respawned. Ro's getting his passive hits in. And now Ro has done some damage to the boss. And I think I might have made a mistake here because I use Ro's active straight away here. And that's not necessarily too bad of a thing because, as I've said before, when you want to use his passive is when you know that you're going to be getting a lot of hits in from summons in the next turn, and a lot of hits in from Tan's Conqueror mode. And I've got 4 Skitarii spawns, so I've got 1 more to spawn, and then I'll be swapping over to Conqueror mode. So I know that in the next turn, Magnus will be being hit by a lot of mechanical summons, and Tan will also be getting a lot of extra attacks in via his Conqueror mode. So I think, yeah, this is a pretty opportune moment to use Ro's active. And I'll still get a decent number of attacks in this turn. So I'll be able to hit the boss with Tan, with Shosul, with Aleph, potentially, and then also switch over to Conqueror mode of Tan and hit Magnus another 3 times. So that's a lot of hits. I'm predicting a lot of hits in the next turn. However, because Magnus hasn't cast his Firestorm, I can count on there being at least 2 turns until the vast majority of my Scarab Swarms are killed by that ability. So I think I could have actually delayed using Ro's active for another turn and gotten a few more attacks in with his active still active. That being said, I don't think it was a huge loss, and I still did reasonably well here, so I'm not too fussed about it. It's just something to consider. Another thing to consider now in this situation is that the map is very cluttered with characters and units, and Magnus essentially can't move anywhere now. He has the movement of 5, so he could move 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces over here into this area. So I do have to be careful that I have some either a character or a summon blocking this area. And also, if I move Tan and Actus away from here, I could potentially leave this sort of area open. So I just have to be wary of that, but that's not going to happen. So essentially at this point I have Magnus boxed in. There's not really anywhere for him to move, and that was a good advantage of ensuring that he retreated into this sort of upper portion of the map at the start of the battle. So before anything else, move to high ground of Row before the high ground gets taken by a Scarab swarm, and use his active. Now I've moved Showsill here to stop Magnus from moving into into this space. Block him off from that. And now it's just a case of getting a lot of attacks in. I've moved Tan to that position because now when I switch over to Conqueror mode I can get 3 extra attacks in from it. This is all going pretty well. And Tan will be hit by Magnus's gaze, but again, after this turn, Magnus's gaze will not be directed towards Tan again, so I can safely tank the hit on Tan. And also, because you're healing Tan with Actus every turn, it doesn't really matter if Tan takes damage as long as it doesn't kill him outright, because you can count on Actus getting him back up to full health again. And I just use this opportunity with Aleph to heal up that Skitarius, because I think it might easily be killed by one of Magnus's abilities. So now I've got a lot of attacks to get through, so I'm just going to speed this up a little. This is why using Rose active in the previous turn wasn't such a bad thing, because he's getting a lot of extra damage from it. Now, I knew that the Skitarius that was standing around here, I can't remember exactly where it was standing, was going to move forward into a position where it could attack Magnus from in this turn. So I knew that this area here would be left vacant, which is why I preemptively spawned a Spore Mine here to stop Magnus potentially at the end of this turn from moving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hexes and positioning himself over here, which obviously would not be very good for me. So the Spore Mines now essentially are just going to be placed around the battlefield, preempting that my summons might be killed and that they might leave spaces that he's able to move into, and to block him from moving into those spaces. Ideally, I would have actually spawned the Spore Mine here, because then in this turn it would have moved into this hex, which would leave this area still blocked off, but the Spore Mine would still have a lot of distance to cover before it was no longer blocking off movement to this area. Because this Spore Mine can now in the next turn move into this hex and it might get killed by, say, the Blade of Magnus, which means that I no longer have any Spore Mine covering this area, which means that I either have to move a character back here or fire another Spore Mine into the area. So always be careful when using your Spore Mines to block his movement and make sure you're getting the most mileage out of them, because due to his high movement, his 5 movement and his ability to fly, there are often times where he can move out of the position he's stuck in to another position on the map. Potentially that could be 2 or 3 different positions, and you don't want to be kind of shuffling your characters around trying to block those positions off rather than just be dealing damage to him. So I know Actus can survive the Firestorm of Tzeentch when it's only dealing 3 hits, so I just keep him in position. And I get the most out of Tan's Conqueror mode by allowing him to trigger 4 mechanical summons for every attack he makes here. which adds up to a lot of extra damage on the boss. The reason for moving Shosil over here was I already have obviously this spore mine covering this, stopping Magnus from moving into this area. I have these sniper drones sort of stopping him from moving into this area. So the only area that isn't really covered is this sort of area over here, which might end up uncovered once all of these Scarab swarms are killed by his firestorm. So I'm slowly sort of moving Shosil over this way to get him into a position where he can stop Magnus from moving into this portion of the map later on. And this spore mine is just more insurance against him moving into this sort of area in case these sniper drones decide to move off. Now it's just Aleph to move. So now Ro has the gaze of Magnus on him. And I know that if I don't get him healed up this turn, he's going to die. And I also know that if I leave him too close to too many other characters, he may end up being targeted with the Blade of Magnus and killed. However, you don't have to move him out of the way straight away. You can still get a lot of attacks in via Ro's passive, by attacking with Tan and Shosil. And then once all of those attacks have been made, you can move Ro out of the way at the end of the turn. And I moved Tan here because I didn't want him to be hit by the Firestorm of Tzeentch, because it will be dealing 6 hits now at that range, and I wasn't sure if Tan would be able to survive it, so I preemptively spawn a sniper drone here, which will allow Tan to get an extra attack off of his Conqueror mode, and he also has a safe place to move to, where he won't be killed by the Firestorm. So I've got all the attacks in with Ro that I can, via his passive ability. There's no point hanging him around just to get one extra attack in from the high ground, just to have him die. I might as well heal him up, let him potentially survive this round, and so that I can then use him in the final round to do a little extra damage. So time to heal him up with Aleph. And finally I put a spore mine here. This is because I know all of these Scarab swarms are about to die, and I don't want Ro to be attacked with the Blade of Magnus, because I think that it'll do enough damage to kill him once he's hit by the gaze of Magnus. So I put a spore mine here, which means that Magnus in the next turn will be able to attack this Scarab swarm or the spore mine directly and kill both the spore mine and these 2 sniper drones with the Blade of Magnus, which is, I think he will do, because generally bosses like to do things that allow them to kill the most targets at once. And giving him 3 targets to kill here is probably more enticing than just giving him Ro as a target to kill. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, given the choice between finishing off Ro and killing 3 summons, I think that Magnus will kill the 3 summons. And that's exactly what he decides to do. So now Ro is thankfully still alive, and again, there's not really much to see here now. It's just a case of getting a bit of damage in before the boss runs away. Here I put Shosil in this position and Tan in this position, because I know that Shosil will spawn his drone into the tall grass as a means of, because tall grass is seen as being more protective than just being putting it onto normal terrain. So I know that Tan will end up with 2 mechanical summons next to him in this situation. which I can then trigger with Conqueror mode to get a decent bit of extra damage off. And that is the end of the attack.